I'm Dwight Drummond. Tonight, police say they'll be out in increased numbers at Woodbine Beach to prevent a repeat of last night's violence that saw officers injured.
Another officer was struck directly in the face by a firework and sustained serious abrasions to his face, ears, and eyes.
It's a yearly thing, unfortunately. I guess people don't really learn.
A night of violence saw a shooting, stabbing, and armed robberies. Thousands are expected back in the area tonight to watch the Victoria Day fireworks. Plus,
ripped my roof off. It ripped my back buildings down.
It's very, very bad since Saturday, and even now we don't have any power.
Thousands remain without power in the province following a violent storm that left nearly a dozen people dead. And
it's just heaven. It is. I don't know what kind of house we'd move into. I really don't know.
A unique Toronto neighborhood on the lake is facing an uncertain future. Long weekend celebrations at Woodbine Beach got out of control last night. One person was stabbed, another was shot amid the chaos. When police arrived on scene, they were shot at with fireworks. For more, let's go live to Ali Shiasan, who is at Woodbine Beach right now. Ali, a much more peaceful scene there now.
That's for sure, Dwight. We're learning a lot more about how this all came to be. So it's believed that this party was organized on social media. Now, I use that word organized very loosely because things quickly descended into chaos. You can actually still see some of the remnants of last night's party in the sand, including some spent fireworks that are littered throughout here. People were actually firing them at each other and police officers. Dwight, the party might be over, but this investigation sure isn't.
It sucks that some people have to ruin it with doing things that maybe aren't the best, to say the least.
What played out at Woodbine Beach last night played out on social media. TikTok footage shows just how crazy things got. Fireworks firing off dangerously close to people and cars, people running to safety while others got caught up in the violence.
Over the course of several hours, there were multiple incidents, including a shooting, a stabbing, and 2 reported robberies at gunpoint.
None of it fatal, all of it troubling. Toronto fire, paramedics, and cops showed up to an unruly crowd of hundreds, and soon Roman candles were pointed at officers.
Some of the officers' injuries are serious in nature and include one officer breaking a leg while responding to a shooting, 2 officers receiving burns and ear injuries. Another officer was struck directly in the face by a firework and sustained serious abrasions to his face, ears, and eyes.
17 people have been arrested, and some will face serious charges, including assaulting a police officer.
We actually heard about it, and we were like, should we bring the family or not? Hopefully that was just a one-off.
Actually, a similar thing happened at the same beach around the same time last year.
It's coordinated on social media, which makes it really challenging to plan for because you don't have a lot of advance notice. Once we got word that this was taking place, you're trying to coordinate and marshal resources from across the city, bring them down to Woodbine, but they escalate very quickly.
Security cameras in the area would have captured a lot, and so did the partygoers themselves who filmed it, which should help lead to more arrests.
What took place last night is unacceptable, and we can't stand for it.
The beach was back to normal today, with all walks of life trying to enjoy the rest of the long weekend at Woodbine, including the sanctioned fireworks happening tonight.
Hopefully the police can step up their presence and they can make it an enjoyable event for everybody.
Tell me about what you like to do when you come down to the beach.
Build sandcastles.
Yeah? And ride your bike?
Yeah. And I'm excited for the fireworks.
Tonight?
Yeah.
So for anyone looking to take in the legitimate fireworks display tonight, you can expect to see an increased police presence. They're actually already here now, and they're going to be here to make sure that we don't see a repeat of last night. Now, as for the arrests, 17 already, more are expected by the end of the evening tonight. And we're looking at serious charges here, not just disorderly conduct stemming from something like this. Serious assault charges, including at least one against a police officer. Send it back to you, Dwight.
Let's hope we have a more family-friendly evening down there tonight. Thank you, Ali. Toronto police are investigating a stabbing early this morning that sent a man to hospital. It happened just before 6 a.m. in the Steeles and Brimley Road area. Investigators say there was an altercation that led to the man being stabbed. He was taken to hospital with serious injuries. An 18-year-old man has been arrested in connection with the attack. And police are investigating the death of a motorist whose vehicle crashed into some East End homes last night. It happened around 7:30 p.m. near Queen East and Vic Park. Investigators say the man was behind the wheel of a truck that went through an intersection and then into a laneway between two buildings. The crash severed a gas line, forcing police to evacuate the properties. The 68-year-old driver was pronounced dead in hospital. Police are trying to determine if he died as a result of the crash or from a medical episode. And investigators in Durham have identified the region's latest murder victim. 20-year-old Arwin Sapasan of Pickering died from a gunshot wound. Officers were originally called for a collision near Taunton Road and Concession Road 4 last Thursday. They found Sapasan with what they say were obvious signs of trauma. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators are asking witnesses or anyone driving in the area at the time with dashcam footage to contact them. The number of dead from the powerful storm that ripped through Ontario and Quebec on Sunday has now risen to 10. Most of the victims killed by falling trees. In a matter of hours, the storm toppled hydro poles, uprooted trees, and damaged buildings. And as Deanna Sumanak-Johnson reports, tens of thousands of customers are still without power.
On a holiday Monday in the nation's capital, little cause for celebration, much for concern. 2 days after a powerful storm ripped through Ontario and Quebec, killing 10 people, more than 100,000 Ottawans remain without power. Crews coming in from other parts of the province and even as far as New Brunswick to help restore it. Schools in the city closed tomorrow.
The councillors in those areas are telling me this is as bad, if not worse, than what they remember from the tornado back in 2018, and then, of course, going back all the way to 1998 and the ice storm that devastated our city.
Elsewhere in Ontario, thousands still remain without power, and those lucky enough to have it are left to their own devices to clean up this mess. North of Toronto, crews are working to fix the dangerous downed power lines, and farmers speak of a particular toll the fast and furious storm took on them.
It ripped my roof off. It ripped my back buildings down. It broke the telephone pole and made all the horses run into the field. All the fences were down. So I was chasing horses.
And in the places that do have power, people remain unsure who to turn to help with the damage. After this tree fell on their house on Saturday, this couple says neighbors have come to check in on them, but that's about it.
People around here are very friendly. They show their support, but it's quite disappointed for me in terms of the infrastructure support and the government support.
They're now calling their insurance company to see if it'll cover the costs of the removal of the tree as Ontarians start their work week with ravages of the weekend storm still all around. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Oakville, Ontario.
Hydro crews are making progress getting customers back on the grid in York Region.
York Region specifically, we had about 79,000 customers impacted at the peak of the storm. That was on Saturday, rather. And throughout the last couple of days, we've been working day and night to be able to restore all those customers. Currently, we are at 4,500 customers across York Region that are still without power.
Officials say Weston Road in Vaughan was particularly hard hit and that in some cases, infrastructure will need to be rebuilt for power to be restored. A lecturer says it brought crews from areas that weren't as hard hit to help restore service in Vaughan. The damage also still evident in Markham today. A number of units that were under construction in a housing development were demolished by the storm. The cleanup and repair work also continuing in Toronto. Toronto Hydro says about 2,600 customers remain without power from the storm. However, more than 95% of affected homes and businesses have had their service restored. Hydro officials say crews continue to work around the clock to repair what they are calling extensive damage caused by fallen trees and branches. And Uxbridge remains under a state of emergency tonight. Power is still out for many, and in some cases, it could be as long as a week before service is restored. Greg Ross is on the ground there with the latest.
Premier Doug Ford got a first-hand look at the devastation in the township of Uxbridge today.
It's shocking. It's shocking. You know, how one area is fine, and you go down a kilometer down the road, and the trees are broken, and the force. You can just take a look at the thickness of the trees. I haven't seen anything like that.
The destruction includes homes that have been torn apart, streets littered with debris, and cars crushed by trees. Ford did his best to comfort residents who have been affected.
I just reassured them that we'll be here. We'll do everything we can to make sure they get up and running again.
Ashley Woodhams has been forced to relocate her family after her house was severely damaged in the storm.
We're put up at a friend's house right now.
Today they return to try and assess the damage.
You can see that there's cracks all along the other side, all in the roof. There's vertical cracks on the inside that are coming down the stairs. These are our new windows.
They were new windows.
Yeah.
They also salvaged what they could of their belongings, some of which they found strewn around the neighborhood.
That's my dress in the tree. I wore that on Thursday.
The future is now up in the air for many Uxbridge businesses as well.
It's all going to depend on insurance companies, the structure, the integrity of the building, and how long it's going to take to get that back together.
Rob Gerard owns the Second Wedge Brewing Company. Half of their roof flew off in the storm. Today he held a staff meeting at his house.
We decided to get our staff together and just give them a little debrief about what our plans are, which is basically we have no idea.
He says it could be anywhere from 8 weeks to a year before they're up and running again. Most of Uxbridge is still without power. Now, the mayor says hydro crews are going to be working around the clock to try and restore it, but it's going to take some time.
We're trying to get everything as up and running as quickly as possible. There's a lot of devastation here. The goal is to get power, which gets us more and more connectivity and gets people comfortable back in their homes, back to work, back to school.
Parts of Uxbridge are expected to have their power restored within 24 hours, but it could take as long as a week for other areas. The mayor says they will remain in a state of emergency for as long as they need to. Greg Ross, CBC News, Uxbridge.
Residents in one of Toronto's most unique neighborhoods say they've been without leases since last month, and some are worried about the future. A colony of about 24 homes that float on the water, lots at the Scarborough Bluffs, is at stake. Brian Patrick Jones has the details.
Nestled among the boats at Bluffers Park Marina in Scarborough is one of Toronto's most unusual and picturesque communities. 24 completed homes sit on top of concrete barges on the edge of Lake Ontario. Unlike traditional houseboats, these floating houses have no motors. Instead, they're moored to a dock. Sharon Lazar has lived here for about 15 years.
It's just heaven. It is. A lot of it has to do with the people. They're very loving and sharing and kind, and they're there for you if you need something.
The homes were originally built as one-story structures to accommodate officials on Toronto Island as part of the city's bid for the 2008 Summer Olympics. When Toronto lost that bid in 2001, they were moved here and offered for sale by the city. Residents have since added second stories, sun decks, and other amenities. John and Ingrid White have had their floating home for 7 years.
It's gorgeous. It's, part of nature, and, look at this beautiful spring developing around us now.
The water lots these residents lease are owned by the federal government, and those leases expired last month. Until new ones are negotiated, some fear pricey new terms could force them out.
It's frightening. We couldn't match that kind of thing. I don't know what kind of house we'd move into. I really don't know.
The local city councillor, Gary Crawford, says he's doing his best to ensure new, fair leases are offered as soon as possible.
They are a very integral part of this community and fully support them being here, as does the community. And my hope is to be able to resolve this issue around the lease soon so we can get back to some sort of normal sense of moving forward.
Ingrid White gave us a look inside her floating home, complete with a lakefront patio. The Whites say they aren't too concerned with their lease expiring, even if it means paying higher fees to the marina.
There's always been fee increases. We expect them to be reasonable. I have no reason to think they won't be.
The three main parties to the lease negotiations are the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the City of Toronto, and the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. None would offer details on the talks or say when they might agree on new leases. Until then, the residents of this floating community are adrift on a month-to-month basis. Ryan Patrick Jones, CBC News, Toronto.
Thousands of Canadian travelers have been facing challenges using the vouchers they received during the pandemic when airlines canceled flights. A Brampton man is now going public in his fight with a travel agency to get back more than $5,200. As Erica Johnson tells us, the agency used his vouchers to book trips for other people.
It all started when a Toronto couple bought tickets for a family trip to India. They went with a local travel agency, trusting they'd get good service. But when the pandemic struck, they were stranded in India, had to take an emergency government flight home. Air Canada offered travel vouchers to customers with cancelled flights. So Surinder Paul Gill waits for his. For months, calls his travel agency repeatedly. Each time is told no vouchers exist. Finally, he calls Air Canada directly, which tells him they sent 3 vouchers worth $5,200 to his travel agency 6 months ago.
So that shows zero?
That shows zero, yeah.
No amount at all?
No amount, fully used.
When he checks the balance, they're basically drained. His travel agency had used them for other people.
I feel like I have been betrayed, surprised, and also my money. How can somebody use my money without my consent?
He files a complaint with the regulator for travel agencies in Ontario. It opens an investigation.
The voucher is intended for the consumer who made the original booking and payment. And so the scenario that's been described seems unusual.
The regulator can penalize individual travel agencies, but like most consumer protection bodies across the country, lacks the power to force them to compensate the customer. Meantime, complaints about travel vouchers have poured into the Canadian Transportation Agency. Many about travel agencies who now want fees to issue those vouchers, recoup the commission they've lost when flights got cancelled, anywhere from $75 to over $200 per ticket.
And the travel agencies are free to charge whatever they want. There's nobody overseeing it, and you have to be buyer beware.
All-Link Travel declined a request for an interview, promised to send a statement, but never did. After Go Public got involved, though, the travel agency sent its customer an e-transfer for the $5,200 it had spent. It also claimed the whole thing was a mistake. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hard to think about what's to come in the forecast, Colin. We're still thinking about what happened yesterday.
Yeah, and I think we'll give you at least a little bit of context here, explanation of what was going on with the weather on Saturday. So this is the current satellite radar imagery. We can all take a breather and work on the storm cleanup because we have the quieter conditions right now. But I'm going to back you up and take you to Saturday and what the radar looked like on that day as this derecho event. A derecho that comes from a Spanish word meaning straightforward. So these are a cluster of thunderstorms that developed back towards Sarnia, Windsor area and raced across the province, at times moving at 120 kilometers an hour. In fact, if I just show you from coming through Toronto around 1 and north of through to the Ottawa Valley, that was all just in a matter of 4 hours. But it's straight line winds generally, and that's why we use that term, that do the damage with these. Now, they can also lend to tornadoes, and it's so complex that, yes, they've been doing the investigations. Environment Canada's been there, the Northern Tornadoes Project, but they want to further investigate before they say more whether it's just straight line winds. And when I say just, I mean we see what those winds have been like. At Kitchener-Waterloo, 132 kilometers an hour was clocked. Ottawa, 120. Pearson, even 120, the highest for the month of May ever recorded. In Uxbridge, at least 100 kilometers an hour there. And we know the damage that was done in that region. So there's further investigation to it, Dwight. And we can take a breather tonight. And for a few days, certainly we're looking at quieter weather. But we'll have more to come on this event for sure.
Yeah, and the cleanup continues right across the province. Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca altered his campaign schedule today to visit parts of the Ottawa region that were hammered by this weekend's storms. He called out PC leader Doug Ford for not visiting the area.
One of the most important parts of leadership is showing up. And here we are, a couple of days after the storm hit. People have lost their lives, families, businesses, so many others facing tough circumstances. And I'm here. Miss Simard is here, as she has been throughout. And where is Doug Ford? Where is Doug Ford?
As we told you earlier, Ford did go to Uxbridge to survey damage there today. Clarence Rockland near Ottawa has declared a state of emergency due to the storms. In a statement, Ford says he has spoken with area mayors, including Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson. He also has been in touch with Hydro One and Hydro Ottawa in efforts to get power restored to impacted residents quicker. Provincial NDP leader Andrea Horwath remains off the physical campaign trail due to COVID-19, but federal leader Jagmeet Singh traveled the province today in her place.
Clearly, I'm not Andrea, but I am here in full support of our incredible leader. She's been fighting so hard for people. I got to see her up close and personal fighting and showing her passion and trying to build a better province when I was deputy leader to her as leader. I can tell you from the core of her being, she's someone who cares about this province.
Singh was joined in Kingston by Kingston and the Islands candidate Mary Rita Holland. The federal party leader also had stops in Ajax and Scarborough. This isn't the first time in the campaign that Singh has stumped for Horwath. He's campaigned for the Ontario NDP in Brampton and Peterborough in recent weeks. Green Party leader Mike Schreiner also continues the campaign from home as he deals with COVID. Today, he's pledging to protect nature and says under Doug Ford's leadership, green space in the province has suffered.
Mr. Ford thinks that environmental protections are red tape, but Greens know that environmental protections are about protecting the places we love and protecting the nature that protects us from climate-fueled weather events.
Schreiner also criticized Ford for his commitment to building Highway 413 and paving parts of the Greenbelt. The Green leader adds his party will create 5 new provincial parks, double the size of the Greenbelt, and work with Indigenous communities to protect at least 25% of lands and water in Ontario by 2025 and 30% by 2030. The campaign has been on the way officially for nearly 3 weeks now, so let's take stock of how the race is shaping up. As the parties head into this final home stretch, Mike Crawley is our senior reporter covering Queen's Park. And Mike, the parties had plans for how this campaign would unfold. So how's it working out for them so far?
Well, Dwight, the Progressive Conservatives, they are sitting pretty much exactly where they hope to be at this point. So let's take a look at the CBC News poll tracker. And what you see here, the poll tracker, it averages all the publicly available polling that is out there. And the story it has told over the past 3 weeks, it is how very little has changed. If you look at those lines, see how straight they are. The PC's consistently in the lead, the Liberals consistently second, the NDP steadily in third. There's been no real movement in the polls, even after the televised debate. Now, there is an old saying, Dwight, among political parties, campaigns matter. Well, it sure doesn't seem like that has been the case, at least in the first 3 weeks of this particular campaign, because nothing seems to have mattered enough to sway overall voter intentions in any significant way, at least not so far.
There's still 10 days to go in this election, so things could change there, Mike. But what are the strategies from the Liberals then and the New Democrats trying to build some momentum in this campaign?
Yeah, so I've been talking today with insiders from both of those parties, and there are a couple of things that they agree on. They both admit it's been hard for them to gain some traction so far. They also agree that these last 10 days of the campaign are really important, and that's especially because those voters who are choosing between their two parties because they don't want to see another term for Doug Ford's PCs, they're likely waiting pretty much until Election Day to decide how to vote. I asked the Liberal leader about where he sees things headed.
Look, I feel very clearly that there is strong momentum that has coalesced around the new Ontario Liberal team with our plan on the affordability crisis, for example, and so much else. But I never take any shortcuts to success because those don't exist.
And with those province-wide polling numbers showing the NDP in third place, Andrea Horvath's team has a tougher sell trying to persuade those anti-Ford voters that only they can defeat the Conservatives. But there are a few regions where the NDP's polling numbers are better than the Liberals, in the Southwest, in the North, and in Hamilton, Niagara. And so the NDP strategists that I've been speaking to, they wish Stephen Del Duca and the Liberals would spend a little less effort targeting NDP-held ridings and more effort on PC-held ridings. Bottom line, though, neither of them is throwing in the towel in this race, even though the PC campaign appears to be kind of on cruise control.
All right, 10 days left. Lots of time to go here. Our senior reporter covering Queen's Park, Mike Crawley. Thank you, Mike. Now, the countdown to Election Day may be ticking down, but it's still an open question of how many of us will actually vote. Chris Glover looks at some of the groups trying to encourage voting.
Signs of an election are all over Ontario, but are people engaged?
I don't know, you don't hear much about it now.
I mean, right now I'm not really that into it, but I feel like once it starts kind of getting more on the ball, I'll look into it. But
It's next week.
God, LOL. Then yeah, maybe not.
In the 2018 provincial election, less than 60% of eligible people voted, and that was the highest turnout in almost 2 decades. There are lots of theories why millions of us don't vote.
I'm not seeing like very relevant topics for what people are like experiencing right now.
Maybe the timing. I really haven't thought about it, but yeah, probably that's the reason.
There's too much things going on. A lot of people pay attention, I think, to what's going on in the States more than here.
For the Arabic, you may have a cup of qahwa or Arabic coffee, and you'll see with some of the Punjabi ones, there's a cup of chai or lassi.
The David Suzuki Foundation translated a voter guide into 6 languages to help people understand how and why to vote, and partnered with local restaurants to dole them out.
Trying to connect with people in a culturally relevant way. And I really found that, linguistic diversity could be a solution to voter apathy. And so that's where this idea sprouted from for me.
Maham Colleen has seen language stand in the way of loved ones engaging with politics.
Something that I'm going to keep with me after the elections is really seeing how engaged my father was. The first time I sent him this flyer in Urdu.
To motivate casting a ballot, Operation Black Vote stresses the importance of representation and power.
Every issue that is important to other Ontarians are also important to us, but we have to realize that blanket policy making doesn't cover us. Because of systemic racism, because of anti-Black racism, we need to ensure that all policies are put through an anti-Black racism lens.
Yeah, I'm going to vote. She's going to vote. I'll make them vote.
Sometimes a nudge from family does the trick.
Then you can't complain if you don't vote. I think you have to have a voice.
And if that argument doesn't work, how about this?
People have become too complacent about democracy, I think, in general, and that's something we need to not be complacent about. I think look at Ukraine, for example. They're fighting tooth and nail.
So passionate, she's already voted in an advanced poll. This year, Elections Ontario doubled the number of advanced polling days to make it even easier. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
Public health officials in Toronto continue to investigate the first suspected case of monkeypox in the city.
Really aren't concerned about widespread risk. The number of cases has been very small so far.
The case involves a man in his 40s. He's now recovering in hospital. The health department says people may have been exposed to the virus if they visited the Access Club on May 14th or Woody's Bar on May 13th or 14th. Monkeypox symptoms may start with a fever, headache, and swollen lymph nodes. It can then turn into a rash on the face and the rest of the body that looks similar to chickenpox. Officials say anyone who has concerns they may have been exposed should watch for symptoms for 21 days. At least a dozen countries which normally don't see monkeypox infections are dealing with cases of the disease. The World Health Organization coordinates a response, and it is urging people to be aware but not fearful. Chris Brown has the latest.
The last thing Britain or anywhere needs is another health scare. But no sooner have the COVID masks come off here than the global medical community is warning of a new threat of monkeypox. The worldwide outbreak of monkeypox infections is so unusual that it's a cause for concern, said Germany's health minister. With lethargy, blisters, and pussy sores, the virus is unpleasant but rarely fatal. Usually found in parts of Africa, what's new is that clusters are turning up in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to another
So, doctors from the World Health Organization took to social media Monday with words of caution.
Transmission is really happening from close physical contact, skin-to-skin contact. So it's quite different than COVID in that sense.
Notably, analysis of the cases reveals several European clusters are within communities of men who have sex with men, suggesting theories of perhaps a super spreader event like a party. Experts say subsequent international travel could then move the virus quickly around the globe.
If one or two people became infected at a mass gathering and then went off to their own countries, they could set up small outbreaks in their countries. So it's feasible, but I'm not pointing an accusatory finger at anyone.
Britain reported 36 new cases Monday for a total of 56, with fewer than 200 confirmed or suspected globally. Worrying, but no reason for overreaction, says this expert.
So we should definitely not be going all out with the alarm meter. We should not be panicking.
Dr. Helen Vamalaratna says unlike COVID, monkeypox is not a new virus, nor does it appear to have mutated.
So the important things here are good surveillance, collecting good data, decent contact tracing.
There is a vaccine if other measures don't halt the spread, but doctors say the greatest harm may be the risk of stigmatizing the gay community, because anyone can get monkeypox. Chris Brown.
Schools in Ottawa will be closed tomorrow. This as more than 100,000 people in the city are still without power after Saturday's deadly storm. Hydro Ottawa says no area of the city was unaffected. Sarah Kester with the latest now.
Basically, I don't know how big it is, 90-foot tree, 100-foot tree, fell through.
The tree crashed onto the roof, allowing water from the storm to pour in.
First night, we more or less slept in our truck. We were pretty worried about our stuff.
Craig's power is still out, but he says he and his wife are going to try and sleep in the house tonight. He brought a generator from his cottage and is sharing power with his immediate neighbors. Down the street, Fartina Youssef and her family have been taking their food over to a friend's house.
Even now we don't have any power, no hot water, nothing. So with 4 kids, it's very, very hard.
She says they've been letting the kids play outside and have been using their friend's washroom. Hydro Ottawa says the damage from Saturday's storm is worse than that of the ice storm in 1998 and the tornadoes of 2018. Mayor Jim Watson says crews from New Brunswick have already arrived to help restore power, and more crews will be arriving tomorrow from around the province. He says the city is prioritizing the hardest hit areas, and he encouraged people to check in on their neighbors.
Our residents continue to shine the brightest when conditions seem the darkest. Please continue to look out for one another. You can provide a much needed helping hand by checking in with your neighbors, friends, and family, especially those who are vulnerable.
Watson says people can apply for money from the city to help cover the cost of wasted food and, in some exceptional cases, medication and medical supplies. That will be welcome news for this single mom who was hard hit by the power outage.
We don't really have money to replace the food that's going bad in our fridge, so that it's financially very devastating.
The French and English Catholic Board and the English Public School Board have all announced schools will be closed tomorrow, citing safety reasons. Some French public schools will remain open. Hydro Ottawa says it will still take a couple days to restore power to everyone in the city. Sarah Kester, CBC News, Ottawa.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in Kamloops, British Columbia today. He's attending a memorial on the one-year anniversary since the Kamloops First Nation announced the discovery of 215 potential unmarked graves at a former residential school. Governor General Mary Simon is among the dignitaries at today's event.
You continue to tell your stories, continue to tell these children's stories. Together, you confront this painful past. Together, you will make sure these children are brought home. And together, we will continue building a better future for Indigenous peoples. On behalf of all Canadians, I offer my sincerest condolences.
The full-day ceremony includes cultural performances, prayers, song, and drumming in honor of the children who never returned home. The discovery of the potential unmarked burial sites sparked national and international outcry and prompted more searches at other former residential schools across the country. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky today told political and business leaders that the maximum sanctions should be leveled against Russia. He made the remarks in a video speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Meanwhile, on the ground in the Donbas region of Ukraine, Russian forces are intensifying attacks, and there is more information around the mounting death toll on both sides. Blair Stewart has the latest on the war from Kyiv.
As intense fighting continues in the Donbas region in eastern Ukraine, we're starting to get a clearer picture of how deadly this war has been for the military. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky was asked by a reporter whether or not this country would lift the ban on men of fighting age leaving this country. And he said that as long as between 50 and 100 people are dying fighting to defend Ukraine every day, that those rules need to stay in place. So that's just kind of a hint at the number of fatalities that Ukraine is seeing among its military. Now, on the other side, we've obviously been given very little information from Russia about its number of soldiers dying. But British intelligence officials in its recent report said that they believe that Russia has lost the same number of soldiers since February in Ukraine as they did in the entire 9-year war in Afghanistan. So that's about 15,000 lives. Now, elsewhere in Ukraine, where Russia has already occupied areas, it is very difficult to get an accurate picture of what life is like there. That's because it's severely controlled. You need permission to go in, and even if you were granted access to go in, Russia would dictate what you were allowed to show. But we went down to an area near the Kherson Oblast. It was occupied in the first days of the war, and since then, tens of thousands of people have left, including many by bicycle, who've ridden over the front line, and they all speak about widespread food and medicine shortages, rural areas where there's no gas or electricity, and they all talk about a climate of fear, about Russian soldiers coming, checking their documents, looking at their phones, really kind of asking questions to see whether or not people support Russia's presence there.
Say anything what Russia not like, and this is really dangerous. If we say you occupied us, soldier not happy, and say straight, you like I shoot you, you like I shoot all your family.
Now today there's also a sentence for the first soldier to be convicted of war crimes in this war, Russian soldier. He's been sentenced to life in prison after he pleaded guilty last week. Blair Stewart, CBC News, Kyiv.
Some of the Ukrainians coming to Canada to flee the war are encountering roadblocks they didn't expect as they look for work. Some positions include a requirement for a medical exam that can be costly and hard to access. It can also take months to process. Karen Pauls reports.
Every day, Helena Melik teaches courses online. Her students are from a university in Ukraine, and like her, the Russian invasion has scattered them around the world.
I have to teach, and then I have to develop some materials, and I have to evaluate, and just to calm them down sometimes, you know, because they feel terrible.
The university can't pay her right now. She's moved in with her son in Winnipeg and doesn't know when she'll return home. While she's here, she'd like to work. With her credentials, there should be plenty of opportunities.
I was very glad to get this work permit, and then I read that there are several restrictions.
The restrictions are the same for all Ukrainians coming here. They can't work in healthcare, childcare, or agriculture until they've had a medical exam. Normally, people do that before they come to Canada, but Ottawa's expedited visa process for Ukrainians removed that requirement.
You can get the medical exam in Canada once you arrive, and once they do that, they have 90 days to complete the exam.
But for many people, that can be a challenge. Each test can cost up to $350, and access is a problem. In Manitoba, there are only 20 physicians accredited by the IRCC to do these exams. 14 of them are in Winnipeg.
And when they are done and submitted, the IRCC website shows it's taking 142 days to process.
So in theory, people could be waiting 4.5 months to get a document reprinted and to be allowed to work in those spheres if there's a job offer.
An IRCC spokesperson says Ukrainian work permits are being fast-tracked. The Manitoba government says it's working with Ottawa to streamline this process. As for Helena Malik,
those new applications or reapplications would be treated with the same urgency. Well, that was not the case.
I have been independent all my life. I have been keeping myself financially all my life, and so of course I would like to have a job.
Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
You can see remnants of that storm everywhere throughout the GTA, leaves and limbs everywhere as you drive around, call it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to take quite some time to clean up after an event like this. And certainly when we're talking about some of those winds, like I was showing you earlier in the show, some of those gusts exceeding 130 kilometers an hour. And they are, still doing investigations. So they'll come back with more information, whether it was just the straight line winds with these storms or some tornadic activity in there as well. All right, our weather headlines. Here's the good news is that we have a chance to take a breather. So we have quiet weather in the short term for a few days here. We'll see some changes toward midweek or mid to the end of the week as we get some rain that will be coming back in. And their temperatures kind of on a slow climb, so a couple of days will come up to getting a bit above seasonal, and then we sort of drop back to seasonal. So we're around the mark of where we should be. All that heat from back on the weekend, which was part of the fuel for those storms, by the way, once that cold front came in, you can see it's really receded here along the southern tier of the U.S. and just hugging on to the eastern seaboard a little bit as well. Otherwise, some colder air has kind of cooler this time of year has filtered in. A look at those current temperatures, 15 in Peterborough, by the way, not reporting at the moment, but you can see 16 for the nation's capital there. We do have high pressure in place tonight, so quieter conditions, lighter winds too, good for fireworks. And by the way, this is a look at your overnight temperature. They'll be milder into the evening hours here. The sun setting for you in Ottawa at 8:33, Toronto at 8:44, and for Windsor a little bit later, it's going to be at 8:54 in terms of when it'll be dark for fireworks. So we do have that quiet pattern. And then as we get towards Wednesday, late day Wednesday, is when we'll start to see showers begin to push into southwestern Ontario, and then they'll make their way across, not reaching you likely till early Thursday in the nation's capital. So for Windsor, a look at your 5-day forecast here with that climbing temperature, kind of just for the one day, and then it drops off. Toronto, the 5-day forecast, overnight Wednesday towards Thursday when that wet weather will come in, although we'll see increasing cloudiness prior to that. And some nice temperatures, mid-20s as you go into Wednesday, and then when you welcome in the rain on Thursday into Ottawa. Dwight.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
When a new plant or animal begins showing up in an area, it can pose a serious threat to native species. A group in BC is working to combat some of those intruders. Chad Pawson has more.
An idyllic day at one of Vancouver's most popular parks, but lurking everywhere are plants and animals that shouldn't be here.
Knapweed, goldfish, knotweed, blackberries, starlings. Oh my gosh, the list could go on, even just the plants alone.
Jenny McCaffrey has worked for the Invasive Species Council of BC for 10 years and has developed an eye for spotting introduced plants and animals, ones that threaten to wipe out native species.
Invasive species are the second greatest threat to biodiversity on our planet, second only to development. So to me, it's about protecting biodiversity.
They're bamboo-like.
Climate change is giving introduced species like this invasive knotweed from Japan an edge in BC. Warmer winters and no natural predators allow many invasive species to thrive, including these cute bunnies. The province recognizes May as Invasive Species Action Month. It supports organizations and volunteers to undertake education campaigns, but also the back-breaking work of digging out invasive plants like these blackberries in Stanley Park at Lost Lagoon.
The issue with blackberry is it grows extremely aggressively and will take over an entire stand like the one we're in and outcompete a lot of the native berries and shrubs that are supposed to be here.
This is the new growth right here this year. So
despite the at times overwhelming threat of invasive species in BC, many volunteers say combating them is one way to take action against climate change.
At the end of the day, you can physically see the difference that you're making. You can see even the meter by meter removals that are being done after you've left a site.
I feel like
I'm making as much difference as an individual can make, but that doesn't stop there. I think there's importance in education about these things. Like general public a lot of them don't even know where the invasive species are in their area.
Those like Ralph and Martin encourage others to volunteer in the fight against invasive species. Meanwhile, over the course of the pandemic, the province provided $8 million in funding to the Invasive Species Council of BC, all of it to employ more than 200 people for this type of work. Chad Pawson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Many sisters are close, but few are this close. At a Czech zoo, two redneck Wallaby sisters are caring for each other's babies, even though they're different colors. Zookeepers say it's rare for a female wallaby to care for offspring whose fur is not the same color as her own. Visitors are flocking to the zoo to see the two sisters munching on leaves. Each sibling is nursing the other's offspring and carrying it in its pouch. It's the first time in 30 years the zoo has seen a mother carrying another female's baby in her pouch. Albino wallabies aren't rare but struggle to survive in the wild because of their sensitive skin and eyes. But this little albino wallaby is thriving because for its aunt and mother, family comes first. And she's Colette smiling. Yes, Colette is smiling because she likes that one. Good story.
I do love it. If I weren't a meteorologist, animal behaviorist. Because I always want to know what they're thinking and how these, anyway, but I love it. I love what they're doing there. Let's just have a look here in terms of we do have high pressure that's in place. It's kind of anchored here, so no active weather to deal with tonight. It makes things nice for any evening plans, firework plans. I was mentioning the sunset times earlier, but your overnight lows, they look like this. Basically, Ottawa at 8:33, then 8:44, and then 8:55.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
That is our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. We're going to see you back here tomorrow at 6. Have a great night and stay safe out there, everybody.